So, can we explore the concept of colorism and its implications during this period, and maybe how your characters experience and navigate that issue?
Well, I would just simply say not only within this period, but
Mm.
currently now, it continues to make, I guess the best way to describe it, it continues to affect our community in regards to us as African Americans. It also permeates out through the wider United States and the world.
Good afternoon, Dr. Copeland. How are you today?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you for asking. I guess we're on our third session here now with our interview on the synchronization of life, your novel that you've written. And I guess we'll go ahead and just dive on in.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the first question I have for you today, discuss how Black love has been represented in historical fiction and how your novel contributes to this representation.
Well, I don't even know if I want to necessarily say black love. I'll just say love, period. But, there are timepieces where they're just African Americans. You think about Cicely Tyson and Paul Winfield, their portrayal of the book Sounder. Think about their portrayal. I read the book also, and then I watched the movie, and I just thought that that was a brilliant representation. And then you also have these stories, these period pieces, such as with my own distant family, uh, the Jeter family. There's a representative of one of my lines of my family that is part of the Loving story out of Virginia, and I think that these stories resonate timelessly through our literature, and we have this great medium that we have right now as far as film and streaming and all that type of stuff. And I'm just excited to see where some of these stories are being taken. But those are the two that just kind of pop right into my head right away. But yeah, those two are solid.
Yeah, I always like Cicely Taylor. I believe it's her when she says, you go to work and you lie to everyone else, but you got to lie to me too.
Right, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
I always like
So
that line. Could you provide historical context for your readers and maybe discuss what the post-reconstruction era was and why it's significant to your story?
well, if we look at Reconstruction, the idea was that African Americans were going to have similar opportunities as the Caucasian citizenry of the country after the Civil War. When we talk about post Reconstruction, that is when the South, as they say, the South will rise again. Well, the South rose and they made decisions that were not equitable for African American people. So if we're talking about post Reconstruction, we're talking about the idea of Jim Crow. We're also talking about the concept of penal, penal um, slavery, which was peonage, um, in regards to incarcerating individuals on trumped up charges, getting them for basically what is slave labor, prison labor. And so that was a period of that time. And then you also have a rise again, once again, of the KKK during post Reconstruction history. And so, it just was not a good time for African Americans in the South. You had issues all over permeating throughout the country, but we want to recognize what was going on below the Mason Dixon line, and it was atrocity. It's the best way to describe it. So we go from the period of slavery, and then we still have it in many ways just as rough with the concept of Jim Crow for approximately the next 100 years after post Reconstruction era.
Right, right. It's interesting. I was telling you about watching, Matthias de Stefano and getting into, more spiritual thinking. And I've been watching past life regressions.
Mm.
Do you believe in like hypnosis and maybe being incarnate and reincarnated at
Well,
all?
I don't know that I believe, but I simply say this. I think anything is possible. So I'm always inquisitive in regards to anything like that. The human mind is fascinating, the psyche is fascinating, and I don't limit myself to anything. I'm always exploring. And so I have seen individuals be hypnotized. I've been a part of, kind of I guess a secondary type thing, just observing someone being hypnotized. I have never been hypnotized, so I don't know what that's like. So, and you ask about the concept of past life. It is incredible. Some of these things that I'm seeing. I think I was watching a documentary fairly recently, and there was a young, if I remember correctly, I think it was a young. I might be getting it switched around. It was either a young African American man, I'm sorry, young African American kid or young Caucasian kid from the States. And he was having a past life regression, and he somehow had connected to a lady that had lived roughly 100 years previous, that was in, I believe, Ireland, and there was some horrific thing that happened in regards to her transition, and he somehow was connecting to her, and it was so interesting because he could go into they went to visit her house, and he could go in and identify rooms, and he's pulling out pictures of relatives of hers that he doesn't know, and he's right on point. So that stuff is always fascinating. So I don't ever close the door on anything. I'm always curious about everything.
Right. I'm thinking about getting one myself. But I was asking you because going on the subject of Reconstruction, I watched one last night that the lady actually was saying that she was Rosa Parks
Oh
reincarnated.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it was really interesting. They kind of tried to get into her mind about, that day, what happened, and um, why she did it, and just asking her several questions about it. And it was really
Now
interesting.
how old was she?
The girl, okay, so this part is a little off. So
Okay.
the woman that got hypnotized, because I believe Rosa Parks died in 2005. I was looking
Right.
it up.
Yeah.
But the woman is an older woman. She has to be in, her maybe late 30s.
Okay.
So it was interesting, but I guess that Rosa Parks came on saying, that she always kind of had a gift. She felt like she was very powerful, like her soul was very powerful, and that she was able to like splinter, like a fragment almost of the soul.
Mm,
And the woman was supposed to, and without going too deep into it, I guess, but the woman was supposed to have had been like an earth angel. So she had a very powerful soul. And I guess that they're able to fragment off. Like if you have your higher soul,
uh-huh.
it can be in multiple, incarnates at one time.
Okay.
And so he was
Very,
asking her. It's really interesting. It was
yeah.
kind of weird at first because I'm Googling it myself. I know she was born, in 19, I believe 14 or 17. And
Mm,
so it was really interesting though to kind of how they tried to get into her mind about what happened. And she was just saying, she had always known she was a really powerful soul, and that she knew that that was coming for her. And then going into it, they asked her why she decided to sit on the front of the bus, and she was like, I was just really tired. I got really fed up with it. And then she was even mentioning how a lot of even the black people on the bus at the time were angry with her also,
right.
because they just wanted to go home. They didn't want to make it a big scene. The bus driver wouldn't move until she moved. And then when the police were called, everyone was spitting on her. And it was sounding so horrific, to have to go through that. But she had mentioned, they asked her, well, why did you do it? And she said that she thought it was important to make a change, even if just for a moment. And then she
Hmm.
just kept repeating that. So I just thought that that was super interesting, to be so strong and willing to go through that. And then, maybe getting the hate on both sides. It
Hmm.
was pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think anytime that you continue to be a lifelong learner, and you're curious, and you're trying to figure this whole thing out, because as we know, this journey is amazing, and trying to figure out our place and where we fit, and especially right now in the moment, how we're fitting in this part of our journey. Um,
Yeah.
it's just fascinating.
It was really fascinating. And he even asked about, I don't know, like he asked her, like, when you go into the spirit world, your loved ones are there to meet you, or whoever chooses to be there to meet you. And she said that Biggie and Tupac were there. It was so random. And,
Right.
I've watched so many of these videos and they're all so realistic. This was the only one that was a little off. But the only
Yeah.
thing that I really found interesting that I really liked that she kept saying was, he's asked why did they leave the way that they left? And she just kept repeating, that they were here to make a change, even if just for a moment.
Mm, yeah.
So it's deep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So can we explore the concept of colorism and its implications during this period, and maybe how your characters experience and navigate that issue?
Well, I would just simply say not only within this period, but
Mm.
currently now, it continues to make, I guess the best way to describe it, it continues to affect our community in regards to us as African Americans. It also permeates out through the wider United States and the world. We have these ideas that for some reason that African Americans are a monolith and that we all look alike and we all sound alike and we know that we are so different. And I guess the concept of colorism has been something that within our race continues to separate. I say these racial constructs that are man made in regards to white people, black people, brown folks, Asian, I think all these distinctions are just literally to separate us. And I find the concept of colorism in our community separates us. And it's ab- absolutely horrific that we decide to degrade each other, or sometimes it's even we say good natured fun, but the roots are always there and they're always a little bit hurtful. I was a young guy and I could play the dozens with the best of them, and we would go there sometime. But I think about why were we going there? What was that about? Was there some level of self-hate that was going on within us? And what is it about? um you hear stories with darker skinned individuals telling you their stories and how they were treated by individuals, and sometimes it's just horrific. Then you have lighter skinned people that have the same story, it's just kind of switched around, and they're the person that's being treated horribly. And so the concept of colorism, the concept of thinking one is better than someone else simply because of the color of their actual skin, their skin tone, is an absolutely ridiculous concept. It is literally the same thing to me. You're just putting it within our community, but it's as bad as racism that we experience, that permeates out and that we're absolutely familiar with. Colorism, I don't think that we even think about it sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And like I mentioned, I was watching a lot of these past life regressions, and a lot of the people that he does interview are African American. And a lot of times they're shocked that when they go into their past lives, majority of the time they were white.
Yeah.
Um, and so, it's interesting to think, that some people harbor hard feelings toward maybe white America, but in the past, you may have been, one girl was a slave owner, and he always just keeps reiterating to them, the soul knows no color, and so I've kind of opened my mind a little bit more, I think, watching that.
Well, the interesting thing, and this is just something that has happened recently with me, I'm the guy that really has an interesting perspective, and I can connect really literally to every line that I know of my family. And I've just gotten to the point that I can actually start connecting with the European parts of my family, understanding how the connection was made and understanding where that led, and actually being connected and fascinated with how those individuals may have lived. It is so interesting. We can do these DNA tests and we can be all split up and we can determine how we're going to go with, if we're going to be like, I'm just strictly going to go with my West African history. Well, then I just diminish this 33% European that's over here also. Um, so I guess, I do understand this and I always preface this and always say this. I get it. I'm African American. I'm African American by my ethnicity. I'm African American by my birth. I'm African American by my upbringing. But I do recognize that there are other parts of me that are just as fascinating. And as I said, I'm always a lifelong learner. So, you know, I don't have to feel as if I was a part of the plan to still not be connected to it, if that makes sense. You may not have thought about me. This may not have been how you envisioned your ancestor to look, but guess what? Here I am. And so, so I just love to, one of the things that I thought about, my wife was, we were kind of doing some bucket list stuff the other day, and we were talking about different places that we wanted to go. And, one of the places for me, um, has been Europe specifically. I'd like to go to Scotland and Ireland just because there is a genetic link. I want to see if I feel. I want to see if I feel anything. I
Yeah,
always assume that okay, when I go to West Africa, and it's not a if, it's when. When I go to West Africa, I just assume that I'm going to feel this connectiveness, like, oh yes, I'm home. What
yeah,
if I feel? What if I feel that in Scotland?
right,
Or Ireland
right.
or Wales, where
Hmm.
where these other parts of me supposedly are from. And so that yeah, I'm open. I just want to kind of experience everything from a human perspective, but also understand and get that I am African American through and through, and that these stories specifically I want to resonate within our community.
Right. And then it's almost like I like how you mentioned the collective, because if you think about it, like how can one person be white in their past life and, black in this life? And it's like it is almost like a collective. Like we're all almost connected in a way.
Well, I think that we truly are. Now, the thing is, sometimes we don't like to admit it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that comes from every perspective.
Yeah.
There are just times that we don't want to admit it. We don't want to go there. It's easier for us to, it's easier for us to treat someone poorly if we feel like they're not our brother, or that we don't have commonality, or we're not connected in the human space. It's always easier. But when you start thinking of, this is someone just like me, this is someone that I'm connected to, this is someone that truly is like family, if I look at the human space, then we struggle with treating people as poorly as we do. If you have a belief in a higher power, and many of us do, and if there is a day of judgment, hey, I don't know what my maker is going to look like. Is he going to look like me? Is he going to be how is it going to be? Is he? Is she?
I know.
Is it good? Is it going to be a boy? Who
Yeah.
knows? But so I can't. I think that it is just hard for me to um, have a heart that's filled with anything less than love.
Mhm.
I try to operate on being positive. I try to operate on connecting to individuals as human beings. And I do that very clearly until you show me that maybe I can't be that way. And that's kind of the way that I try to operate.
Yeah, it's a good way to operate. I agree. Unconditional love.
Yeah. And that's Carl Rogers,
Yeah.
unconditional love. I am a
Yes.
Rogerian therapist. Yes, absolutely. Carl Rogers.
Okay, maybe next we'll talk about the unique challenges and triumphs of Black women during this time as reflected in your novel.
Oh wow. How about all of it? I think about Ellen. Well, Ellen, we think about John Thomas and whatever contributions he may have made to the financing of um, the siblings' education, but do we understand that Ellen was the person that ran that store, and Ellen persevered throughout all the tragedies that an individual, not just a woman, but a person can
Right.
face. You know, you think about she loses three children
Mhm.
uh, before she passes. Um, she has a significant other partner, however you want to designate it, John Thomas, who is an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Not only that, but she ends up finding out that this is her cousin. We don't know. We never really explore how does that make her feel. You know, and so I just think that, if you look at her as the individual, and she's the first generation of this family that from our Mackenzie side that we're starting to see. But it is just fascinating to watch her as she just begins her part of this journey. And then we watch as Bessie comes along and Bessie goes to college and Bessie becomes a teacher and Bessie is leaving the area and she's married and and it's just interesting to see all of them navigate this time and this time that it wasn't always safe to be yourself. It wasn't always safe to present yourself as a strong black woman.
Right.
Um, it wasn't always safe because as Bessie could literally almost kind of choose how she wanted to present herself.
Mm,
If she wanted to blend into the white world, she had the ability to do that.
right.
But she was a person that almost kind of just knew who she was and who she was meant to be. And so, looking the way that she looks, she is identifying that I am African American. Not only am I African American, but I'm married to this dark skinned man that was 20 years older than me. So, what kind of statement is that?
Right.
And so all of the women in my family, as I just went down the line briefly, but as I go down the line, they're all just I can't even begin to describe the women in my family. I think and a lot of
Right.
us we do understand the importance of women all throughout our families and how it permeates through the lines. But I am just extremely proud and connected with the women that come through that line, the Mackenzie women, and their strength and their level of being able to navigate a time that I couldn't even imagine and surviving, and not only surviving, but making things better for each generation. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. It's hard enough being having to do it without having all the, social constructs and everything to pound on you as well.
Yeah.
Discuss how love and romance can thrive in the face of adversity.
Let's just be very candid. Sometimes love and romance was all you had to look forward to.
Mm, yeah.
If you think about our enslaved ancestors and
Mhm.
all that they knew was work, 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 rest, work, 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 rest. Well, the only time that you may have for yourself and that significant other is during that rest period.
Yeah.
So I wonder what those relate. I think whenever you take anything for granted, you're not as sincere in the presentation. So if you could imagine, I don't think they took any moment that they potentially had together where they could express love in whatever way they desired. But I don't think that they took it for granted. I think that they realized that those moments were precious and they may have been few and they may have been stolen, and they also may have been marred by the interruption or influences of others, but that they were valuable, important, and it was something that sustained them.
Yeah. It's always so hard to try to put yourself in how they were thinking and, how they persevered and just wanting to maybe pick their brains. And it's just fascinating, what they might have been thinking on a regular basis.
Well, it is interesting for me. I always do this from time to time. Sometimes I'll do it on something, some sort of social media. But what I'll just type the word on a background, but the word is slavery. I just
Mm,
have it in big word, big bold letters, and then as a caption to it, I'll say something to the effect, "Now that I have your attention, I want you
mhm.
to reflect on how wonderful your life is compared to those who may have come before you."
Right.
And so that has a way of sometimes putting things in perspective. We think there are times that and this is from a mental health perspective, we go into these dark places and we feel like that the world is so horrible and it's so horrific to me, and I can't sustain myself, and I can't do, and woe's me. What about those that were enslaved?
No.
What
Yeah.
about our ancestors? And see, this is the thing. Our ancestors, our literal ancestors who made us, had to be some strong people because they survived in order to make us.
Yeah.
So, we, which is
Crazy.
that it's amazing. So when we understand that many of our ancestors came from West Africa, well, we were the strongest, we were the ones that survived. We
Right.
were the ones that were resilient. And it
Right.
goes on from generation to generation that
Right.
we are the ones that were able to survive, we're able to figure it out. If you come from a lineage of that, you know that you're powerful.
Right.
You own every bit of it,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. There's so much we do take for granted. We know it. It's amazing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had a friend of mine, and we were talking, and he said, "Yeah, think about this. If you look at, I don't know, your two times great grandfather, your three times great grandfather, and we take for granted that we have, this house with four bedrooms or five bedrooms and two baths and three baths, and we look at that like, oh, we still want more.
Yeah.
Well, do you realize the perspective? How would those people two and three generations look at you? They would look at you like you were the master,
Right.
like you were the enslaver. You
Right.
know, that's how the enslaver lived.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
It's crazy. Yeah,
it's about perspective.
it is.
Yeah.
Discuss the importance of having diverse characters in historical romance novels.
Well, I think that representation and diversity is needed across the board in all of the things that we do, whether it's writing, whether it's film. I think that there just needs to be an accurate representation of our interactions as people. Um, the United States is uh, claims to be this wonderful melting pot of individuals that come together. And we know that some of that is very true as we understand how we have interacted with one another, but we also know that there are some deficits that still exist. I just think that if we are going to ever get to a point where we are understanding, and I don't know. I just feel like that instead of pushing further and further, farther and farther apart, we need to have an awakening. We need to have an understanding that that's not going to get it. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
And I'm the guy that does this like across ethnicities, across racial construct, across religion, across geographical and places and regions. It's just time to come together as
Yeah,
human beings.
it's been a long time. I mean,
It's been a long, but it's like any time that we think like we may be making progress, then all of a sudden it is just absolute chaos. And it's
yeah,
amazing if you have any kind of level of empathy and you can just kind of sit back, and I can sit back and I'm looking at him like this is absolutely unbelievable.
right.
It is. Now
Yeah.
think about it. You want me to show you how things are unbelievable now? I'm
Mhm.
going to give you a prime example. All right. Little Rob Copeland in, I'll say, 1976.
Okay.
1976, he would be roughly about 11 years old.
Okay.
1976 was the bicentennial. 1976, there was a guy that played in Buffalo, New York. His name was O.J. Simpson. He was Little Rob's favorite football player. He was almost like Michael Jordan to Little Rob before Michael Jordan, to give you an idea. O.J. Simpson, Little Rob, O.J. Simpson's playing with the Bills.
Okay.
Bruce Jenner, this wonderful decathlete that has recently gone to the Olympics in 1976. He's won gold medal. He's on the Wheaties box. He's the best athlete in the world. Bruce Jenner. Bill Cosby. What? Bill Cosby is what? He's this wonderful actor. He's been in all these great shows. He's done all these wonderful things.
Yep.
That's 1976. If you had told little Robbie that this was going to happen,
Yeah.
I would have looked at you like you were insane.
You're going right where
Not
I
to,
was thinking too.
yeah, not to mention Michael Jackson. You
Hmm.
mean to tell me in 1976, huh? You mean Michael Jackson is going to bleach his skin? He's going to destroy his nose? I mean,
It's going on still now today. With
yeah,
Puff Daddy and how,
yes.
I just
All
can't
of it,
believe it. I just can't believe
all of
it.
it, all of it is almost the height of insanity.
Yeah.
When you are really trying to process some of this stuff. I mean, come on, at what happened?
Yeah. I know.
What happened to get us this far off track?
I know. It's always almost like, you have some African Americans, and I hate to go back to color, but they get to a certain point in life, and then it's like, regardless of what happens, they still kind of bring them back down to size. I don't know.
I don't see. I guess for me, I don't know. I don't know that you can bring me back down to size unless I give you the opportunity to do so.
True, true. And that's true.
You
People
know,
make their own choices. So,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, and understand, I'm by no means a perfect person.
right.
I make my mistakes as everyone else, but I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot that you could do to me or
Oh,
you know,
yeah, you still have to make the right choices at the end of the
yeah,
day. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
So I don't know, but it's just interesting when you think of it that way. You know,
It is. It is. And it's just it's crazy to me because, no matter how rich they got, they just kept, it's just I don't know. I don't even know how to put it in words. I'm following the story so closely at this point because like you mentioned, we're watching these people all our lives as we're growing up, their household names, and then all of a sudden, they're getting in all these
well,
things. It's crazy.
and the thing is, it's interesting because it literally, and I don't know, I don't know about conspiracy theories or anything like that, but I know it's interesting to me. Um, I used to love R. Kelly. I
I know.
absolutely used to love him. I don't listen to R. Kelly anymore. I can't.
I
Can't
know.
I? You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
now, you know, I'm I used to be big into Puffy and Mace and I'm not bumping them, and
Yeah. Now
um,
they're going after Jay-Z, and
yeah, I'm
it
like,
just keeps going. I'm like, oh my
and
gosh.
so now it's like, oh my goodness, not only is 90 R&B going to be tarnished in regards to R. Kelly, but now, I mean, what's going on? Usher and Puffy and
I'm sorry.
Pop Justin Bieber, and I mean, it's just it's the
Usher,
hype.
Usher,
Yep, and what's the dad? I teasingly say Carl Winslow, but Reginald Dale Johnson, and
Will
just, I
Smith
mean, come on,
too. Have you heard
I
Bilal?
I just can't, I just
I know,
can't.
no, Jada Pinkett
It's,
was a hard one for me to swallow too, because she's like everyone's next door neighbor, like the American sweetheart, and it's like, oh my
but
gosh.
but it also shows this, and I truly believe this: when you have the ability to transcend and to share your gifts with people, I think that is a blessing. And I think people need to start treating it like a blessing. You got to understand, anything that you do that's outside the box that's not you.
Yeah.
That's a higher power. You
That's
know,
another
I
thing about celebrities too, is because they get, this fame and this wealth and all these things, and I don't know if it's communism, but you think maybe they should stay more humble, even though they're in that position, and share their wealth and do well for the community. You know what I mean?
but there are a lot of awesome people that are out there, and I want to recognize this. There are a lot of people that are out there that do a lot of things, and they don't do it for public consumption. Um, I think, oh God, I saw something the other day with Flavor Flav, and I can't remember what he was doing, but he was making sure that he stayed out of the limelight with what he was doing to give back. And see,
Yeah.
those individuals are truly humble, because it's not about them. Those are the individuals that may have the ability to stay connected and to recognize that anything that we do that's outside the norm or different, or anybody thinks that we have an ability or a talent, that's not us. That's your higher power. That's the gift he gave you.
Right. That you're
And
not the
so
source of
if
these powers, that you're
right,
just a
right.
beacon for them.
And it is why anybody, if they ever read any of my stuff and they say, oh wow, you are a great writer, I say, no, I had the greatest teacher.
Right. I like that too. And that's actually the best way, I think, to think about it, because that's when, the ego comes into play, and it's like, oh, you do have, maybe getting these greater gifts from source or the creator or whatever, but then the ego is like, oh, this is me. You know what I mean? And
But
it's not
see,
coming
yeah, and I don't know. It is. Some people call it being humble. Some people call it being enlightened. Um, I don't know, but I just have always kind of gotten that anything that I do, anything that I am able to do, that's all by the grace of God. I don't have any.
from right.
Um, I don't. You know.
I
Yeah.
think that's the best way you've come up with the best way to put it, because that's exactly what it is. I like that.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked about this before, about your writing process, but could you share some of what your writing process is? Do you conduct research, develop the characters, plot of the story? We've talked about that though, I know.
Yeah, everything for me has just been kind of organic and
Mhm.
and just kind of grinding into it now with the type of stuff that I'm doing with family connection and history. I do want to make sure that things are during the periods that they're supposed to be, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
for instance, I had to research the Ku Klux Klan and when they began to be more relevant again in the United States. There was at one point in time in Reconstruction that the Klan had been wiped all the way out,
Mm-hmm.
literally wiped all the way out. And so when you start talking about the Klan again, it is post-reconstruction when the Klan becomes powerful again. And then you got the early 1900s that the Klan is almost like a political party. They're
Right.
marching in downtown New York in Manhattan, you know.
Yeah.
So
I can't imagine their presence. We went to there's a ghost city out here. It's called Virginia City. It was
yeah,
from
uh-huh,
like the 1800s. It was a, it was one of the largest cities in the West Coast besides San Francisco back then. And it's
right.
about 15, 20 minutes away from where we live. So I like going out there, it's just because it really has that old feel, and I take the kids and we do pictures and stuff. But there was a car from probably like a 1950 or maybe even, I don't know, 1940 car, and it has these
Mm-hmm.
flags and all these billboard posters stuck to it, and it's like support a Trump supporting car. And it gave me chills, and it just kind of
Yeah.
like I was like, hey God, that gives me chills. Could you imagine being alive back then and them really riding around in those cars,
Oh wow. Yeah.
hate, and it's God, I couldn't imagine how strong their presence was back then and how chilling it was for people.
Well, absolutely. And the thing is that was the norm, you know.
Right,
Though that wasn't the abnormal experience, that was the normal experience. Those were the
right,
things that you had to work through. Those were the things that you had to navigate. I think about my mom. I can't even imagine. My mom talks about, the segregated South and the Jim Crow South and not being able to go to the same bathrooms and not
right,
being able to drink out of the same water fountain and not being able to sit down and get a meal. Understand, I'm not talking about my grandmother. I'm not talking about my great, 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 great grandma.
right.
I'm talking about my mom.
I
I talk
know.
to my mom every single day.
Yeah,
So this is what she is telling me from her life experience. And
yeah,
so, we are definitely not, we're not where we need to be. And so there are times that you'll get folks that'll say, well, why do you always talk about race? Or why are you playing the race card? Or this stuff is entrenched in the psyche and the soul of America.
yeah,
Until we address it, until we talk about it, until we make it a priority, it's always gonna be there.
right.
We
And we
gotta
talked
we
about
don't
that last time. Go
yeah.
ahead, sorry.
No, I'm just saying, it's interesting. And I don't know the exact amount, and I would need my mother to remind me, but we live down here in South Carolina. It is kind of our home state now, even though I grew up in the state of Illinois, but I'm in South Carolina. I've been here for quite a while. So I'm a South Carolinian. Well, in South Carolina, there was a recent finding in the budget of quite a bit of money. And I'd have to ask my mom, but I believe they said there was a flux of $2.5 billion. I
Hmm,
believe that something to that effect. Like, oh, we just found $2.5 billion in the budget. We don't know where it came from. I don't know what we're going to do with that. There have been all types of stuff. Oh, well, we may give $3,000 to each home. Da 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 da. Huh. But we don't want to discuss reparations.
right.
You
Yeah,
you understand what I'm saying? And so $2.5 billion that we just found, we're trying to figure out, but we're in a state where 1/3 of the individuals that were descendants of individuals that came into this country, 1/3 of our descendants came in through, I'm sorry, our ancestors came through the Charleston, South Carolina harbor, but
right,
we don't think it's important enough in this state to have a discussion about reparations. It is amazing to me. And
right.
reparations, I don't know what reparations are going to look like. I don't know what they can look like at this point. but to simply not even have a discussion,
Right.
that is amazing to me.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Uh,
I agree. I was gonna say I was watching an interview where they were talking about that, and they say, it's interesting, it's fascinating how, people from other countries now, or even Holocaust survivors, can come and they are given, reparations or easily given business loans and different things like that. But yet African Americans who were technically trafficked here against their free will. They didn't migrate, willingly. They were stolen and brought here, and then it's just like you drop them off and then you freed all the slaves. Yeah. But then it's like, okay, now catch up.
we are
We've gotten all this
we
free
are
labor. We've gotten,
we are
go ahead.
African Americans are the only group that has never been recognized by the United States in regards to giving them something for the high level of inhumanity. You think about this, our Asian brothers, our Japanese brothers that
Right.
were in the internment camps during World War II. They were given money. Our native brothers, we don't think about this, but they were giving land reservations. They were also given uh, free education. We do understand because we always tap into it. Oh, there's money to go to school if you're native, right?
Right.
Can you
Right.
show if you're on the roll, right? Well, that's because they were given those opportunities. We've never been given anything.
Exactly. And there's that new
Nothing.
congresswoman that I really like too. I can't think of her name at the moment, but I love her. And she was saying that too. Like a lot, majority of the people struggling from student loan debt are African Americans, because we're
Yeah,
striving for that American dream and we're struggling still at this point to drag ourselves up to achieve it,
absolutely.
and them giving free,
Absolutely.
education. Another point that I thought was really interesting that you brought up that we kind of touch base on last time about segregation and how they integrated everything and maybe if it was the best idea. You know what I mean? Where
Oh, you're talking
black
about
kids,
yes.
yeah, with the busing system and and then another point that we were talking about actually the other day because it just seems to keep coming back up that we can imagine how like your mom and other kids that were forced into an all white school felt. You know what I mean? And then it's almost to this day where we have all white kids in our class. You might have one or two black kids, and then the teacher is probably a white person too. And they're
Mm-hmm.
usually telling the kids, you'll never be anything. You're going to be a garbage truck driver and different things like that. And just how society would have maybe formed differently today if we would have been taught more by people who look like us, people who believed in us more, if we weren't always feeling so uncomfortable in those situations. Like I just couldn't imagine how they, went through that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
fascinating.
Well, and I think about like my uncle. My uncle is the first generation. So my uncle is 8 years my senior. He's 13 years my mom's junior. So he comes along 13 years later, and he's the part of the first uh, uh, integration that goes on in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And he is going to Rock Hill High School, which is the predominantly white high school in 1970. That's when
Okay.
he is there. And so, and my mom went to all black in segregated high school, and she's doing that in the what is it, the late 50s, early 60s. And so, yeah, just kind of shows you where we've been and kind of how far we continue to have to go, right?
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But even to this day, like I wish for, more majority of the black kids today, like God, I wish that they had more black teachers or they could feel more welcome a lot, especially being out here on the West
It,
Coast.
well, I think that, one thing that we have to understand and one thing that has to be I guess, our charge as this generation that's bringing up the next generation is we have to get back to that caring, nurturing ability that we have as a community. We've gotten to a point that many of us are scared of young folks. We're
Yeah,
scared, and I guess I'm maybe something's wrong with me, but I'm just like, you know, until you show me that I have reason to be afraid of you, I look at you as I look at myself. And if it wasn't for the grace of God, maybe I would be in a similar situation that you may be in right now. And so
right.
I have to show you a level of grace, and I have to show you a level of connectiveness. I had a friend of mine one time, I was getting upset. It was when I first had received my doctorate, and we were doing something for the community, and they wanted to put Dr. Robert Copeland on the program. And I was like, no, I don't want that. You can just put Rob Copeland on it. And I said, no one else is putting Mr. So and so, I said, I don't want all that. And he simply told me, he said, look, I want you to understand this. This is not about you trying to be humble. This is about we need to let these kids understand that there are people that look like them that can achieve these great things. And so some of these don't even have an idea what it is to for someone to have a doctorate in education.
Right.
You are representative of something that they can hope to achieve. So understand it's not always about you.
I completely agree with that too, because that's like part of that imposter syndrome where like I've never met a doctor, let alone
Mm-hmm.
one that's, I can talk to that, might not be like a doctor in the hospital like you would traditionally think of
Mm-hmm.
a
Oh yeah,
doctor. There's different
yeah,
types of doctors. I agree.
yeah, yeah.
That might be a good place to stop for today. Where are you now at
All
an
right.
hour? Unless you wanted to go a little
Oh
more.
no, we're good.
We're good? Okay.